Good evening and welcome to Read Aloud 3, where it is you, me, and the Trinity. And today I am continuing to read in the first book of Chronicles, and I wanted to just get you up to speed, which is just that we're slowed down. As you can tell, I just posted a video that I recorded, I guess, at the beginning of this week. And had missed the day or two before, a little bit before that, and then predicted that I would also be missing some days during the week. And I did, but I didn't get that one posted also when I thought I would. So that was why yes, it sounded, there was a bigger gap than I thought on this channel. I posted it on my other channel on accident and discovered it later. So you got something end of last week, past middle of this week, and now I'm getting back on track because we're at the end of the week. So I'll get back on track over this weekend, I hope. Okay, daily Bible reading. Chapter 21. Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. Interesting, huh? That the census was something that was from the enemy, the taking of the census. So David said to Joab and the commanders of the troops, "Go and count the Israelites from Beersheba to Dan. Then report back to me so that I may know how many there are." But Joab replied, "May the Lord multiply his troops 100 times over. My lord the king, are they not all my lord's subjects? Why does my lord want to do this? Why should he bring guilt on Israel?" And, I still don't know what the beef was about taking a census, but it's like he had his right-hand man there, and if he didn't know, this was a warning that he shouldn't be doing that. And I'm not sure again why, but I believe that God also reprimands David for it. So I think that's something worth looking into and understanding, like, why he may have done that, in the face of the warning and everything. Verse 4. The king's word, however, overruled Joab. So Joab left and went throughout Israel and then came back to Jerusalem. Joab reported the number of the fighting men to David. In all Israel, there were 1,100,000 men who could handle a sword, including 470,000 in Judah. But Joab did not include Levi and Benjamin in the numbering, because the king's command was repulsive to him. This command was also evil in the sight of God. So he punished Israel. See? Then David said to God, "I've sinned greatly by doing this." So he's acknowledging it as sin. "Now I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing." The Lord said to Gad, David's seer, "Go and tell David, this is what the Lord says. I'm giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you." So Gad went to David and said to him, "This is what the Lord says. Take your choice. 3 years of famine, 3 months of being swept away before your enemies. Ooh, no, thank you. With their swords overtaking you, and 3 days of the sword of the Lord. Oh, or 3 days of the sword of the Lord. Whoa. Days of plague in the land, with the angel of the Lord ravaging every part of Israel. Now then, decide how I should answer the one who sent me." That's a tough one. So that's a tough would you rather. You know that game my son used to want to play that with me all the time. I'm like, I don't like this game. David said to Gad, I'm in deep distress. Let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is very great. But do not let me fall into human hands. Yeah, good point. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel fell dead. So God went for first option, I think. 3 years of famine, maybe. Plague. No, plague is different. Okay. So he said letting God decide. And God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But as the angel was doing so, the Lord saw it and relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was destroying the people, "Enough, withdraw your hand." The angel of the Lord was then standing at the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusites. David looked up and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth with a drawn sword and his hand extended over Jerusalem. Then David and the elders, clothed in sackcloth, fell face down. David said to God, "Was it not I who ordered the fighting men to be counted? I, the shepherd, have sinned and done wrong." Well, let's pause there. What do you think could be wrong with him having the fighting men numbered? I feel like I've heard something about this. I don't want to put words in someone else's mouth. Of course, I'm not quoting anyone. But what I seem to recall was that, because David was numbering these men, it was like he wanted to see what their physical, earthly might looked like. Maybe to be like, are we good enough? Do we have what we need in the physical to fight these battles? Doing it by natural means. And I think David had enough understanding of the way that God worked in his past to know, like, God doesn't, like, look at David and how he killed Goliath. Well, I don't think that's happened yet. But look at how, or wait a minute. Yes, it has. If he's a king, it has. Sorry. So, I mean, yeah, that and other situations, all these battles that they're fighting, is like, it's surely God's doing. So for him to, not in a certain way, not acknowledge God all of a sudden and take his stock in his own, what he could see, I think could have been what he did wrong here. Okay. This is one thing that I believe I've heard. Okay, so then let's see. So he says, "It was me that did it. I have sinned. These are but sheep. What have they done?" Basically, they are following lead. That's what sheep do. "Lord my God, let your hand fall on me and my family, but do not let this plague remain on your people." Then the angel of the Lord ordered Gad to tell David to go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up in obedience to the word that Gad had spoken in the name of the Lord. While Araunah was threshing wheat, he turned and saw the angel. His 4 sons who were with him hid themselves. Then David approached, and when Araunah looked and saw him, he left the threshing floor and bowed down before David with his face to the ground. David said to him, "Let me have the site of your threshing floor so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped. Sell it to me at the full price." Araunah said to David, "Take it. Let my lord, the king, do whatever pleases him. Look, I will give the oxen for burnt offerings, the threshing sledges for wood, and the wheat for the grain offering. I will give all this." But King David replied to Araunah, "No, I insist on paying the full price. I will not take the Lord I will not take for the Lord what is yours, or sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. So here's David's heart again. After all, God's own heart. He's like, no. He has that integrity that this is an offering, and I'm going to give something up for it. So David paid Araunah 600 shekels of gold for the site. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. He called on the Lord, and the Lord answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of burnt offerings. Wow. Then the Lord spoke to the angel and put his sword back into its sheath. At that time, when David saw that the Lord had answered him on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, he offered sacrifices there. The tabernacle of the Lord, which Moses had made in the wilderness, and the altar of burnt offering were at that time on the high place at Gibeon. But David could not go before it to inquire of God, because he was afraid of the sword of the angel of the Lord. Yeah. So that was the chapter 21 of First Chronicles, and we see David has some guilt here for something that he did that was against what God's will was for him. It seems very clear. And I think if he didn't know going into it, he was made very aware, and he came to acknowledge it himself. What do you think of that? There are times, I think, in our walk with God that we may go deliberately into something sinful, knowing full well. But I tend to think more often we may just, or at least on the other hand, at times we act in our flesh, like kind of, it's like the way I'm reading this chapter. What did you do wrong? Kind of unknowingly, but at some point, I think then we realize, oh, that's what this is, that's what, this is wrong, this is some form of idolatry, maybe. I wouldn't have seen it that way before, and I thought this was a good thing, but because I'm put it before God, or I put my trust in that, rather than in God's ability to be trustworthy and strong enough and good enough, then it has become, it was out of idolatry, and in some ways it is like, it was forming my mouth to say idolatry because it's so close to adultery and it could sound the same, but in some ways it's like that. I mean, I think God has said that to some of his, in the word, sometimes he'll say, you basically were unfaithful to me, because if we're faithful to him, we know who he is to us. We trust that. We don't go off looking for that somewhere else. It's like committing adultery if you're in marriage and you're in a covenant with someone who is that person to you in that relationship, and that has that,